Okay, we're looking at first year textbook, mixed exercise 7, so we're on algebraic expressions, and we're looking at question 6. So it's an exam question worth 6 marks, so I'm expecting there to be a little bit to do here. Okay, so I'm asked to factorise this cubic. Now, so you could put that into your calculator and get the 3 roots, but I think we're going to have to assume that for 6 marks, they'll find a way of wording the question that means you can't just use your calculator. So they use phrases like solutions based solely on the calculator are not acceptable, or something like that. Okay, so first thing I would do is use factor theorem. So there's no mention of factor theorem, but it's the quickest way to find what I want to divide by. So, and in terms of what it's worth substituting in, well, I would use the +8 as a clue. So the only values that are worth choosing are going to be factors of 8. So +1 - 1, +2 - 2, +4 - 4, +8 - 8. And you could have a scan, and my gut reaction is, yeah, so I can easily check that 1 and -1 are not going to work. I can sort of just check that without having to write the working down. So I'm going to try 2. You could sort of just put this into your calculator, but I'll write a little bit of working just to show that I'm definitely using the right method. So just write it down a little bit. So it's, again, so 2 times 2 cubed. I'll get there in the end. Right, 2 times 2 cubed plus 3 times 2 squared minus 18 times 2 plus 8. So what I'm after is for this to equal 0. So I don't think it's going to, but possibly if I try, maybe not. Okay, well, so that's giving me, so that would be 16 plus 12 minus 36. Actually, sorry, I might be right. Yeah, well, that does equal 0. Job's a good one. Okay, so if when I substitute in 2, I get an answer of 0, that is telling me that x minus 2 is a factor. That's from factor theorem. It's vital that you know factor theorem. It really is quite straightforward. So if you don't know what I'm talking about there, just do a quick bit of a read up on factor theorem. Okay, so what that has told me is I should be able to take x minus 2 out as a common factor. So let's write the full cubic out. Okay, so I'm going to do it by inspection, and then I'll run through it quickly using division. So I know that x minus 2 is a factor. I know that if I divide a cubic by a linear function, I should end up with a quadratic in these brackets here. And I know that when I multiply the brackets out, I should get 2x cubed. And the only x cubed term I'm going to get is when I multiply x by the x squared term. So the x squared term has to be 2x squared. Yeah, because that's going to be my only cubed term. So x times 2x squared will give me the 2x cubed. Okay. I can also think about the constant. So the constant is supposed to be +8, and the only constant I'm going to get is when I do -2 multiplied by the constant in that quadratic. So that tells me, so -2 times -4 would give me the 8. Okay, so those two are always really straightforward to find. To get the x squared, to get the x term here, I'm gonna look at the 3x squared. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to think about, well, when I multiply these brackets out, where am I going to get an x squared term? Well, it's going to come from the -2 times the 2x squared. So that would give me -4x squared. And then the x times the x term in that quadratic. So together, they need to equal 3x squared. So I need 7x squared, because -4x squared plus 7x squared would give me 3x squared, which would mean that would have to be 7x. So that when I do 7x multiplied by x, I get 7x squared. Okay, and then I can use the -18x. So I haven't thought about that. at all yet. So I can use that as a check that the 7x is correct. So where am I going to get an x term when I expand the brackets out? Well, from the -2 times the 7x, so that would give me minus 14x, and from the x times the -4, so that would give me minus 4x, and they do add up to minus 18x. So that's just a way of checking that the 7x does work. That is correct. Okay, so if so that's not quite finished because I need to check if this factorizes, but just in case you're sort of not really happy with that process, you do have an alternative that you might have been using, which is perfectly fine, and that's reverse grid method. So I'm doing this cubic divided by x minus 2. So I know it's going to give me a quadratic. And so reverse grid method. So when I use the grid method, that's going to be my cubed term. They are both going to give me x squared terms. They are both going to give me my x term, and that's going to be the constant. So, and it is exactly the same logic that we used to, that was on pen, that we used to get this result here. So if that needs to be 2x cubed, that must be 2x squared. 2x squared times minus 2 is going to give me minus 4x squared. My x squared term should be 3x squared, so that needs to be positive 7x squared, which would mean that would have to be 7x, so that when I do that multiplied by that, I get 7x squared. If that's 7x squared, that's minus 14x. My 2x terms have to add up to minus 18x, so that will need to be minus 4x. For that to be minus 4x, that must be minus 4, so that when I do minus 4 times x, I get minus 4x. And then if that's minus 2 and that's minus 4, that'll be positive 8. And that's kind of my way of checking that it's worked out correctly, because that should just end up as being the same value as that. Okay, so you can see we've ended up with the same, do highlighter, we've ended up with the same quadratic either way. So obviously when you haven't got anything written there, that means it's a plus 7x. Okay, so let's just double check, because that might be our final answer. So this is where we've got to so far. Okay, and the question just says factorize completely. So if this quadratic doesn't factorize, then that is factorized completely. I think it does. And obviously, if you weren't sure, you could always just pop it into your calculator and check whether you've got rational roots. So if it does factorize, obviously 2 is a prime, so it would have to go to 2x and x. 4, so 4 could be 4 and 1 or 2 and 2. And I think if I do 4 and 1 and do plus 4, because that will give me 8x, and minus 1, because that will give me minus x. That does then give me 7x. So that would then be my final answer. So let's just quickly check that. X minus 2, 2x minus 1, x plus 4. Lovely.